Hey, what's going on everyone? My name is Void Fox and I'm taking a look at Forge Quest. It's being advertised as a voxel-based lighthearted RPG. I like the fact that the dungeons were randomly generated. The layouts were always different. It looks like it pulled from a lot of different patterns, circles, big rooms, little loops of like small corridors. And I think it all worked really well together. And this is I think a key factor in dungeon crawlers. If you can nail down a randomly generated dungeon layout, then that makes your game incredibly more replayable. It's not the only factor that can make it replayable, but it definitely helps. And I think Forge Quest does it well. The enemy variety with different attack patterns was pretty good too. Within the first few levels, I was fighting all kinds of different enemies. Bats, skeletons, I think these dog fox looking things that threw like these hammer bros hammers at you. I didn't show any boss battles, but I did fight one boss, and I'll tell you that the boss was pretty huge. A lot bigger than any of the other enemies that I faced within the game. The game also has pets, although I'm not a huge fan of their attack having a cooldown as a skill on my hotbar. So basically what it means is you go to town, you can go to the pet shop, and you can pick from a variety of different pets ranging from different prices from I think 1,000 gold to 6,000 and higher. And you get things like dogs and dragons and owls and flying books, and they all have different attack patterns, auras, buffs, single target, AoEs, etc. But what I didn't like about it is that they weren't permanent. And what I mean by that is, yes, they're permanent when you add them to your hotbar. They're spawned and they follow you around and they look all cute and adorable. But in order for you to have them attack, you have to activate their skill manually. And then that gives them, like 15 seconds of attack. And then after that, they get tired and then they just go back to following you again. This is something that I'm not a big fan of. I like to just spawn my pet, and then the pet just does what he's supposed to do, and that's whatever he's got. Like, he attacks, or he buffs, or he defends, whatever. But I don't like it as a skill slot that I have to activate. The game has an interesting mechanic known as forging. This is something that I really, really, really liked. So basically what this means is the game allows you to take your old loot and make it useful. So you take that old loot and you can use it to upgrade any loot of your choice of similar nature. So for instance, if you have a sword, you can use other weapons that would be added to your weapon slot and use those to upgrade that weapon's power or its DPS or other stats that exist on that weapon. I think that's really cool. That basically is a really interesting way of creating a money sink in a game. A really great money sink. Because what else are you supposed to do with the money other than buying pets or outfits? So I thought that was a big win for the game right there. The game also has runes, which you can socket into your items, your armor, your weapons, etc. And runes as well follow the same approach to forging. You can use other runes to upgrade the power of a specific rune. There are other things in the game that allow you to do this. You don't just have to use old loot. You can go out and mine like these crystals, and there's various types of crystals, and you can use those to apply to upgrades. So if you don't have, say, another sword to add to the forge, you can start adding in gems, and that'll work as well. So the more you add, the higher the price, but of course the more the item gets upgraded. So I think it's a great money sink. The game also has, as advertised, light skill trees and socketing, right? And I spoke about socketing runes. It's got these skill trees that aren't crazy, sprawling, Path of Exile kind of deepness going on. They're very simple and very straightforward. They do branch off, but usually it's only about 2 or 3 branches, and that makes them very easy to understand. The choices are pretty clear. These skill trees are also used to unlock future abilities, and what's really neat is that once you put a certain amount of points into a skill tree, it unlocks sub-skill trees. So basically think of each class has their own skill tree to start, and then they can be divided into 2 subclasses. So from there, you can customize your character further in terms of the type of passive stats and active abilities that they'll have. So I thought that was pretty rad. It's a similar mechanic you see in a lot of other RPGs, but they do it in such a way that it's, it's light, it's easy to understand, it's quick. You can just sort of jump in. You don't have to crunch numbers in a spreadsheet sort of deal. The game's got multiplayer, although there's not a ton of people playing the game. It's best suited to play with friends that you know. So you maybe plan to buy the game with a friend, and then you guys go online and enjoy the adventures together. Now, I mentioned outfits earlier. You can actually go and purchase, for in-game money of course, outfits to customize your character's look. So these are outfits that sort of give you a unified look and feel for a character. Think of them as cosmetic only. They don't provide any stats. They're just to kind of give you some extra customizable aesthetics to your character. I think this is pretty cool. I like this part of the game. For me personally, I actually prefer the option of having my collected loot determine the way my character looks. There's just something really cool about finding a new epic weapon that looks completely different from the one I used before, or a new piece of armor or helmet or what have you. And that totally changes the way my character looks. I kind of got a bit of ADD in that sense, that I like to see change happen all the time. Now, having said that, I still enjoy the fact that this game allows me to customize my character with a more, again, unified look with buying outfits. Maybe sort of a hybrid approach where certain types of armor do change your character if you're not wearing an outfit. But at the end of the day, I think the outfits thing is a positive for this game. So there's some things that I didn't like. I found comparing loot was a big pain. I always found myself wanting a gear compare window to pop up, as the ones that you see in many modern RPGs, such as Diablo or Torchlight. When you hover over one piece of gear, it shows what's currently equipped, and sometimes even takes it a step further, shows you what stats will positively and negatively affect your character. So that's something that I was sort of always wanting to have and to have happen in Forge Quest, but it didn't. Now, this isn't a huge issue because the stats of loot and your gear aren't crazy complicated. So it's not too difficult to just hover over your items, memorize the stats, and then hover over the one that you want to compare. But even then, I was still wanting to see that gear compare window because it just makes for a more smoother, pleasant experience. It's less, I hate to say it, but it's less thinking that I have to do for little things like that when I just want to get back to the action. Not a huge negative, really. One that was kind of a bigger negative for me was the fact that the controls are a bit clunky and don't feel incredibly responsive. Especially when it comes to casting or charging your spells, I felt them a bit cumbersome. And the main issue for me was when you click your attack button, left click being your main hand and right click being your offhand, which is typically like a wand or a staff or some kind of spell or throwable. I found that the issue lied in when you went to charge. So the game seems to react based off when you mouse down, when you click your mouse button down. As soon as it clicks down, it attacks. And the issue there is it doesn't wait, the game doesn't wait for you to determine whether or not it's going to be a click and hold. And that's important because that's how you charge your attacks. If you click and hold your attack button, it charges your attack. What ends up happening is when I click to hold, it does my normal attack first, and then it starts to charge. Which leads me to another point. There's no visual indication that I'm actually charging my attack other than when it's done charging, then there's a visual indication. I mean, this isn't a game breaker by any means. I just think that a simple animation would definitely make this a nicer experience. So in addition to the attacking and charging of weapons feeling a little clunky and unresponsive, they also didn't really feel or look very visceral. So when I was hitting at my enemies with my sword or casting my spells, it didn't really feel like there was a lot of weight behind it. It was kind of floaty. And that's an issue for me because with action RPGs, I want to feel powerful. I also want to look powerful, and I want my enemies to look like they're getting hit hard, you know what I mean, by my massive attacks. And I didn't really feel that at all in the game. So that's something that I think, I don't know, could be remedied by maybe there are reactions when you hit them, or maybe different sound effects. Although the sound effects do help it a little bit. They do sound pretty decent. I think just a lot of it is in the actual animation, whether it's the swinging animation of the sword or the way enemies react to being hit. Another issue I had was there's this match 3 gem farming game piece that felt a bit gimmicky. And what that is there's these sort of mega crystal bunches that you can harvest for those crystals that you can use for upgrading. And those mega, like, uber crystal bunches, as I call them, activated a match 3 game. And so depending on the gems that you've matched 3 of in a row, or 3 or more, that's the amount of gems that you would get, that you would mine from that, uber crystal. I just felt this was a bit gimmicky because although match 3 games are fun, it just seemed to really slow down the game. And of course, mining these crystals are optional. But, if you're like me and you want to crack open like pretty much every box, or, you're running across crystals, you're like, you know what, it's only a few hits, I want to grab it. These uber crystals just, with the match 3 game, just sort of bogged down the experience. Not to mention that the match 3 game didn't actually play perfectly. And what I mean is, usually when you match 3 or more of the same color, they disappear, an animation happens, and then a new row drops, right? Well, with those types of games, chaining can occur. And when chaining occurs, you can get these multiple chains, and it's really satisfying. And for me, that's where a lot of the satisfaction comes with match 3 games. Well, there's no chaining in the mini game, so again, it sort of feels like an unfinished, tacked-on feature. I think it's good to note that I was suffering some performance issues. Some areas would drop and seemingly lock to 30 frames per second. I'm not sure why this was happening. I did try to change some video options, and it was still occurring. The frame drop still happened. Having said that, outside of that, I was maintaining a solid 60 frames per second. But you might notice in this video, I dropped quite a bit, and mostly within the dungeon I was in. So what are my overall impressions of Forge Quest? I think it's a decent action RPG. It lives up to its description of being a lighthearted RPG with light game mechanics, such as the smaller skill trees, the ability to socket runes into gear, and not requiring a spreadsheet to compare character and loot stats. A big win for me personally is the fact that I can use old loot to upgrade my gear. It's especially useful when I haven't found anything better than what I have equipped. I think that's really, really great. It's such an amazing feature. And at the end of the day, it's in the title of the game. The game's called Forge Quest. The game isn't necessarily about finding epic loot, as it is about finding decent loot and using your old loot to make epic loot, to make your current loot even better. So I think that's pretty rad, and I think it's a great mechanic that fits very well into this game. For the price, it's got a healthy amount of content and replayability, especially with the upcoming free Endless Dungeon patch, which, in my books, any free newly added content gets bonus points. That's just wicked of the developers to do. And this is something they're reacting to based off feedback they've gotten on the Steam forums and so on and so forth. They're listening to the community, and the community said, hey, an endless dungeon mode would be amazing. And the dev said, you know what? We're going to do that for you. So it's currently in beta as of the date of this recording, and it should be coming out soon. There's a lot to like, and if you can get past some of the negatives I listed, then this could be a hidden gem for you. Having said that, by no means do I think this is a bad game. It's a fun little dungeon crawler, and if you can find a friend, you can even share this lighthearted adventure together. This has been Void Fox. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the flippity flop.